Howdy, folks. This is Big Sam. Let me get that back into view there. Welcome back to the Mosin Museum. Today, we're taking a look at a super cool early French contract Mosin bayonet. This thing is pretty unusual, so let's get into it. Okay, so right off the bat, we can see this is a very early style Mosin bayonet because it has this locking ring. The early 9130 bayonets have that little button that's spring-loaded. This means it's quite old. How old? Well, in fact, we actually know when this one was made, which we'll get to here in a second, but this is actually from 1894, and it was made in France. And this is actually I guess we'd call this a German capture / German used bayonet, because it actually comes with a sheath, which is highly unusual. This is a huge metal sheath, and I'm trying to figure out what type of metal this is made. It almost feels like it's made out of some type of aluminum. It's extremely lightweight. I don't know how much aluminum they had in World War I, but this is definitely not steel. You can see there's a seam where they put it together right here. This is really fascinating, and it's about as long as the whole bayonet is. In fact, let me get my handy tape measure out here. You can see this guy goes all the way out to just over 19 inches in length for the sheath. The bayonet itself is around just around 19 and a half inches overall. You can see it's got this little lug right here, so you can actually attach this to your belt. And we do have a fair number of pictures on our website of Germans using some type of sheath like this for their M91 bayonets, as well as dragoon bayonets, because we know dragoon rifles use the same kind of bayonets. Although we know this is actually not a dragoon bayonet because it's a French-made bayonet. They didn't make dragoons. So let's get into it. How do we know that this bayonet was made in France? Well, we need to take a look at the markings. Now, first of all, if we're looking for a French contract bayonet that was produced by the Chatellerault factory in France, has to have a locking ring. Now, we know it has a locking ring, but that doesn't mean it was made in France. A lot of the early Mosin bayonets had locking rings up until the late 1920s even. You'd see this. So we have to take a look here at the body itself to see if there's any kind of markings. We could see a serial number, which we'll get to in a second. If we look at the base here, you're going to see there it is, just right there. There is a C in a diamond. That, folks, is a good indicator that this is a French contract bayonet, because that is a French proof mark right there. Very rare to see it on a Mosin bayonet for a couple of reasons. One, we know how many they made, and Chatellerault didn't actually make all that many. They made 503,539, give or take, of these bayonets from 1892 to 1895. Now, most of these bayonets were either destroyed, lost in the Russo-Japanese War, lost in World War I, or probably ended up in Finland or the Balkans. And among those, practically all of them, not all of them, but for the most part all of them, we're talking a very high percentage, had their markings obliterated on the bayonet body itself. And that's one of the things that makes it so difficult to actually positively identify an original French contract Mosin bayonet like one of these. A lot of times they would just get worn down from use and the markings would just not be visible anymore. But another thing that was really common was, like, the serial numbers, for example, would actually get removed. They would scrub the serial numbers, and then they would renumber them to whatever rifle it was currently on, which could have changed, 3 or 4 times over the course of a rifle's life, because these things got used a ton throughout the 20th century. What's really fascinating about this guy, though, if we look here at the numbering, this is actually the original numbering, the original font from the Chatellerault factory in France. We can see this guy is serial numbered 195,000. Oh no, that's a 3. There we go. I can read that a little better. 193,639, which means this is a relatively early 1894 year of production. The Chatellerault factory did not actually start over with a serial number every year. So like when they got to the next year, they didn't start over. They just kept through the whole serial number range throughout the whole range of production. So that in 1892, you would have serial number 1, and then all the way up until 1895, you would have serial number 503,539. And almost always, this marking is going to be gone. So not only having a Chatellerault bayonet, but having one of these that actually has the original serial number preserved, that's not crossed out, that doesn't have another one stamped somewhere else, is really phenomenal. You don't see this hardly ever. This is quite an interesting rarity. So I'm really happy that we can actually bring this to y'all so you can see for yourself what this actually looks like. Let's take a look now and see if there's any other interesting markings on this bayonet. So remember, we have our serial number here. We have our C in a diamond, which is over here. Then if I flip this guy over like this, you can actually see right about there. There we go. There's a very small marking here on the lug here itself. So not a ton of markings on these, but there are a couple. If I flip this guy over, you'll also see a number, which looks like the number 8 right here. Probably just an inspector number, but I wanted to show that as well because I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, there's one other interesting thing I wanted to note about this bayonet in particular in regards to the Chatellerault factory. If you look at serial numbers on the parts that were produced by the Chatellerault factory, one of the things you're going to notice is they typically have the letter N as a prefix before the serial number. There's no N here. For example, if you looked at the butt plate of a Chatellerault produced M91 rifle, you would see the prefix N before the serial number. And it turns out, actually, they just didn't stamp the N before the serial number on bayonets. I've seen only a handful of pictures of these, and none of the ones I've seen actually have the N before the serial number, which is very strange, I thought. I don't know the reason behind it. Maybe it's just because it's small and it was hard to fit. It does seem like you could also see this serial number stamped in various different places. Sometimes you might see it here on the main shaft itself. Here kind of provides a good area, although this is a curved surface. This is relatively flat, although as you can see here, it's kind of interesting. You can see this is actually at a bit of an angle, but it is flat, so it does sort of provide a very nice surface for actually stamping a serial number. So that, to me, that kind of makes the most sense of where I would stamp one. Now, again, as a quick refresher of how these bayonets work, there's really no button, so this thing kind of moves around freely on its own. Really, the key with these is you want to find a sweet spot with the tension using this screw. You want to find it so it's not like super loose, so it doesn't flip around on its own, but you want to be able to turn it so that anytime you want to, you can just turn this such that now the sight base will clear, and so you can now attach and detach this on the rifle. And then once, let's say it's back on the rifle and you want to secure it, you can just hold this down and then slide it back so that it hits this little lug here, and now you're locked on over the rifle. And if you want to take it off again, you just slide this guy over till it hits the other end of the lug like that, and now the front sight base will clear that. You can twist this and then take it off of the rifle. You would typically do that in, back in the day, if you were on a long march. These, the soldiers didn't like having a long march with these guys on their rifles. A lot of the time they would like to take them off, and then they would actually flip them around. And then if this was the muzzle of the rifle, they would actually flip it around and stick it over the muzzle of the rifle like that, just so it's not quite as long. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Kind of an interesting tidbit. So I hope you guys have really enjoyed this cool opportunity to take a look at original Chatellerault bayonet that's just in really fabulous condition. Not only is the condition great, but you really just don't see these in any type of condition. And when you do, you may not even know it because the markings have been obliterated and it's just kind of hard to tell. So something that I'm just really excited that I got to bring to y'all today. I know we've been taking a lot of interesting looks at French rifles here lately, so I figured this was a great opportunity to take a look at one of these bayonets. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to take another look at our website if you have any questions, or if you want to take more of a deep dive on some markings as well. We have a great markings page up on our website. Let me know if you guys got any prayer requests, and we'll see you next time.